Awesome, thanks. Everyone can hear me? Okay. Am I what's keeping you from spring break? Is that what I just heard? Not yet. You got a few more classes? All right, good. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Paul McCormick. I'm the Executive Director of North American Materials for PACCAR. So I've got quite a few slides to go through. If they get too boring or your eyes get glazed over, I'll go faster and hit come to the fun stuff. If you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to either raise your hand or speak loud enough so I can hear you and I'll try to answer them. We've got 50 minutes. We'll try to make this quick, but also informative. And I am pretty transparent, so I'm willing to share almost anything. So, a few pictures. This is who I am. What does that mean? It means that I went to Whitman College, a small liberal arts school in Southeast Washington State. About 1,200 people. This is about 10 times bigger than my classes were, so a bit intimidating, but not bad. I got my master's degree from Seattle University, so a little bit larger out in the city of Seattle. I'm originally from Washington State. I've been with PACCAR for 22 years. PACCAR is the parent company of Kenworth and Peterbilt. You probably know Peterbilt next door. We got a big factory there. I've been in multiple roles across multiple divisions within that organization. I've lived in 3 states with PACCAR: Washington, Ohio, now Texas. I'm married with 3 children. The 3 are all teenagers, so this is what keeps me somewhat sane at work, which is kind of scary. I like running, playing guitar, useless trivia. I love tortillas. You saw the Halloween costumes, I think, on the prior slide. And I haven't had caffeine since I graduated from college. I know, it's impressive. So I've got a few slides in kind of my career path, and I think this will start to be somewhat more interesting. I heard that you guys like to have origin stories. So I'm not a superhero, though I think I am at some point, but my origin story at PACCAR. I graduated from Whitman College as a history major. I worked at a small business that did corporate gifts, promotional items, trophies, plaques, things like that. Thought I wanted to run my own business. I was very entrepreneurial. Worked there for about 2 years, decided that running my own business might not be possible to have some of the aspirational value in my life that I wanted. And so I had customers that would come in and I would also often, talk to them about what they did for a life and the business. And one of those that came in was a gentleman by the name of Mark Pigott. Mark Pigott is the executive chairman of PACCAR, and his father and grandfather and family started the company in 1905. So I passed him my resume. He snatched it up off the counter. He looked down and said, "Oh, you're an Eagle Scout. Boy Scouts of America. We love the Boy Scouts." Walked away, as he's wanting to do sometimes. And I got a call 3 days later that said, "Hey, we've got an opportunity for you in our purchasing department, entry-level position. Make sure you've shaved before you show up for your interview. And it's very, very low paying, but we think you're going to love it." And sure enough, it was all those things. I went through 7 interviews, I think because the CEO of the company walked the resume through. But it taught me to be bold, to be honest with myself, and really has allowed me to have an in with the organization and then work my way up through different levels. So all that coming full circle, started in our corporate purchasing area. This is where I was a buyer. I bought things like office supplies, toilet tissues, things like that. Not very glamorous, but certainly a need for a 30,000 person company. Started doing that and then bought some equipment. So robotics, tooling, big chunks of metal. Worked my way up to be a manager of some of those similar commodities. So starting to lead people, put some vision in place, and then was given an opportunity to move about 8 miles south to our Renton truck plant. So at our Kenworth factory in Renton, we build the large trucks that are considered off-highway, ones where the tires are bigger than me. They go to oil fields, they go to Eastern Canada. Really fun stuff, really unique. So you might sell one of those every couple of years because they're heavily invested in a $600,000, $800,000 vehicle, and was able to run their materials department. So from a supply chains perspective, every part's important. From a Renton perspective of some of these large trucks, you might not buy these parts for 3 or 4 years, and the suppliers might not have the components you need for 2 or 3 months. So really taught me this understanding of how the supply chain worked. Along the bottom there, what I learned in kind of these development years was working hard, accepting challenges, being flexible, and then networking across all levels of the organization. So starting at our corporate office was great. I got to see the senior executives. I got to kind of emulate what they did, have conversations in the hall. And then at the factory, I got an understanding of how the operation actually works, how it's great to think strategy. It's great to think long term, but really it's get the part to where it's needed and make sure the people that are on the assembly line have what they need so they're not standing around and costing people money. Questions here? Okay. Transformative years. So proceeding well in my career, I really liked Washington, had my children there, given the opportunity to move to Ohio. So in Ohio, I was the assistant plant manager and the senior assistant plant manager. For perspective, in Renton, we built 8 trucks a day. In Ohio, we built 170 trucks a day. So the pace, the volume, the sheer magnitude of what we were doing was substantially different. It was a new location. It was a new relocation for my family. We didn't know anybody there. Chillicothe is where it is. It's a small town south of Columbus. So knew everything. And what that taught me was taking risks, enjoying those opportunities, absorbing knowledge, and leading by example, right? So I didn't come in knowing everything. I didn't have an understanding of how things should be done, but I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to instill in folks and adapt and learn and understand. And, kind of being an outsider gave me a different perspective, which was helpful. So now the dynamic years, the current years. We have a division at PACCAR called Dynacraft. They're in McKinney, Texas. They used to be headquartered in Washington State. So after my years in Ohio, I was given the opportunity to join Dynacraft. I thought that meant going home to Washington. What it meant was on my second day of the organization, telling everybody in Washington we were moving to Texas and they would no longer have their jobs. That said, we offered everybody an opportunity to move with us. We had 8 people out of 200 move. So it was transitioning that organization to be central here, to hiring a whole new organization and losing all of that knowledge and building up a different division perspective. And then after 5 years in McKinney, I was given the opportunity to join Peterbilt, so to speak, or PACCAR North American Materials, which is where I am today. It shows Peterbilt on my vest. I'm a PACCAR employee. PACCAR signs my paychecks. But when I'm in Denton, I wear Peterbilt. When I'm in Kirkland, Washington, I wear Kenworth. So I'm non-denominational, agnostic, whatever you want to say. My role today is extensive. It covers all 5 of our North American truck plants. I'm responsible for making sure every part makes it to the line and making sure that all of our freight comes inbound to make sure it's there appropriately, and then other duties as assigned. What's this role taught me, or these years taught me? Adapting to market conditions, which are dynamic, right? We have COVID years, we've got tariff years, we've got any supply chain disruption you can imagine. Influence more strategically, so leading a division was great. Certainly different than being kind of a player and a manager, but definitely being more of a seer and a visionary. And then having fun, right? I'm on year 22 of my career. I'm not out to be the next CEO of PACCAR, so I can have a little bit of fun. I've established my relationships. I know when to push the limits and when to pull back. That's important. Okay, so who's PACCAR? Or Peterbilt, if you might know it this way. So we're a truck and transportation solutions provider that drive the world to a better future. That's awesome. Really, we manufacture heavy-duty trucks. We sell truck components. We finance the trucks. We lease the trucks. And we leverage technology wherever possible. Somebody asked earlier, who's PACCAR? Well, PACCAR is the parent organization. All of these nameplates beneath it are divisions of PACCAR. So Peterbilt, Kenworth, DAF in Europe, those are the 3 truck manufacturing divisions we have. PACCAR Parts is aftermarket. And then you've got everything from leasing, finance, Dynacraft, India, Australia, Mexico. We're everywhere, 30,000 strong. So a couple of slides on PACCAR. We've got a culture of excellence. Premium trucks is what we provide. Transportation solutions is how we provide it. We're always looking to market expand. We've got advanced manufacturing, but really the foundation of the company is quality, technology, and innovation. Since 1905, that's what the Piggott family, and that's what PACCAR's established itself with. So from an operational perspective, key metrics, safety, quality, capacity, efficiency, and flexibility. A couple of factoids for you. So last year, average OSHA score of 1.36, well below industry average, the lowest, the best we've ever had. Our quality is best in class. We audit multiple trucks a day to ensure that we continue to have continuous improvement and make sure our customers are getting what they want. We've continued to increase our capacity as truck demand has grown. You wouldn't believe it, but the Denton factory produces a truck every 6 minutes. And we're approximately 15% market share at Peterbilt within the organization and the trucks that we produce. So that's a lot of trucks being produced. Efficiency, we deploy Industry 5.0 and Vision AI technology wherever we can. And then more recently, with the recent tariff announcements in November, we're local for local production. We used to manufacture certain models in Canada that would be distributed everywhere. Now we build in the US for the US, we build in Canada for Canada. So a lot of mixed model strategy there. Speaking of local for local, so we're positioned well for tariffs. Last year, March through November, we weren't tariffed on non-compliant components. We had a lot of tariffs on steel, aluminum, and then we weren't tariffed at all on Mexico and Canadian trucks. The good news is we've always been kind of a majority U.S. manufacturing company. So the transition to this post-Section 232 has allowed us to really minimally gain tremendous cost advantages over our competitors. We saw a greater than 50% reduction in tariff charges, and again, building in Canada for Canada, building in Mexico for Mexico, and building in the US for the US. Customers drive our technology decisions. We get a lot of questions on what are you doing about electric trucks and autonomous trucks and any other type of vehicle you can think through. We've got all those options available for customers. It's really what they need and want. So clean diesel is still the majority of what we build. There are applications where electric trucks make sense. There are applications where hydrogen trucks make sense, liquefied natural gas trucks. We're testing autonomous vehicles and continue to do that. Again, we'll follow where the demand is because we're a for-profit company. Okay, and why are we a for-profit company? Because we're really good at it. We lead industrial categories. This is not just heavy truck manufacturing, but industrial categories in return on invested capital, return on sales, and shareholder return. So in business since 1905, 120 years, we've paid a dividend every year quarterly since 1943. We've got $8 or $9 billion in cash now. We are really good at making money, and that's important to us. Not afraid to say it. So profitable growth, we've talked about that. Net income's high. Our market share against where we operate is high, where we spend R&D, and then finance and parts growth is substantial. So people think about buying a car, it's the most expensive thing you'll ever do, as you probably know in passenger car markets, right? The money is how you service the car afterwards, right? So you're coming in for oil changes, for annual services, for the parts and components that are, the equipment, original equipment manufacturing components. We offer all those, and that's where a lot of money's from. Okay, so we'll talk Peterbilt, Kenworth brands a little bit, and then get straight into materials. So specific to Peterbilt and PACCAR, we have 430 supplier locations that supply components to us. We've got 69,000 active part numbers. We take about 200 inbound shipments a day. An equivalent factoid is one truck produced has about a trailer load of material. We have 750 employees for materials, and we've got about 750,000 parts consumed daily. We leverage our supply base. We're more or less a truck assembler, right? So we rely on our suppliers to provide the components we need. We find this optimal because they're best at what they do. We're the best at what we do. We leverage about 85% of our components going to what we call an MSS or offsite location. You might know them as a 3PL. So they take the components, they'll deconsolidate them for us. They'll put them in what we call kits or in sequence orders so that when they deliver to the factory, all the operators need to do is turn around and put the component on in the right place and make the connections they need to. Really trying to take risk opportunities or positions away from a quality perspective that don't need to be there. Part characteristics. We leverage electronic data interchange. We have discrete parts, group parts, or line set parts. So I mentioned kind of that kitting and sequencing. We have parts that are on logistics, so bins that go back and forth, and then Kanban, kind of the fill the needs that you have, and then refill, kind of a replenishment system. And those go everywhere from bolts and nuts up through engines and transmissions. This is probably where we become this Fortune 200 company that relies on technology, but it's a bit vintage. So we've got a really old system that we use. We're trying to leverage opportunities with AI and new technologies to help us, but this really helps us plan our product. So maybe you don't know this, but every truck is custom built. We don't run 50 of one model and then 50 of the next model, or run one customer and then the next customer. Throughout the day, every truck in that sequenced order is different. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, there's constraints within the factory to say, I can't do too many axles at the same time or too many of these paint colors at the same time. But more importantly, it's really to make sure that our employees and the groups are focused on making sure that every truck is treated as it should be, right, for every individual customer. And even mixed customers don't have the same types of trucks going down. So a FedEx truck might have an automatic transmission in one case, might have a single axle in one case. The colors are all the same, but the interiors might be different. So it kind of keeps people on their toes, really makes sure we're focused on quality and helping through the supply chain. We try to use data to drive all of the decisions we make. So you can call it Six Sigma, you can call it advanced analytics, whatever it is, but we're not making gut instinct decisions. We're leveraging data where we can. We've got a strong network of Peterbilt specific suppliers and PACCAR suppliers. You can see primarily in the States, but there's a lot in Mexico and some up through Western Canada. Um, we have tiered suppliers, so we leverage our tiered supplier that's going to supply us. They leverage their tiered supplier, and sometimes we get engaged if there are issues to help those tiered suppliers. So you can imagine 400 plus suppliers, there's always an issue going on. That's why I don't sleep and my hair's gray. Okay, different transportation modes. It's great being a truck manufacturer because we get a lot of our components via truck. So our customers are our suppliers and carriers at times. We leverage truckload where possible. This is a mode where we're actually taking a dedicated truck and cubing out the trailer and getting those delivered to us. We've got less than truckload deliveries where it's small packages. We've got parcel deliveries. We leverage air charter where necessary, including axles or engines at times. It gets very expensive. I know a lot about air charters and I shouldn't. We leverage international freight as appropriate and then expedited ground freight. So on the logistics side, at Peterbilt specifically, we've got 9 folks, including a supervisor and coordinators. Weekly, we've got 1,000 truckloads, 300 LTLs, 1,600 parcel shipments, and 110 expedites. They're split up by region just to kind of help coordinate and make sure they understand their lanes and the carriers for those lanes. But kind of a subset of what we do within the materials organization. And then I mentioned these material manufacturing support services. We have 3 primary MSSs within the greater Denton area. So Elite Comprehensive Logistics and A&W. You can see the footprints here, but they employ, again, extension of kind of Peterbilt, 500 people within the area. They handle 600,000 parts a day and make deliveries of 240 a day. So pretty extensive. The Peterbilt reaches everywhere. We leverage what we call a plan for every part. So it's not just a part shows up and we know what to do with it. We have to do some extensive understanding of how it's going to be used on the line, how the operator wants to see it, what position the part's going to be in, how we organize that in our bills of materials, how we communicate that information to the supplier. So there's a lot of effort behind the scenes that go on to make sure that when the employee turns around to grab what component they need to put on the truck, it's there. And this is kind of the hidden factory, the unglamorous part of materials. I mentioned a little bit about kitting. So it's taking a bunch of components, putting them into some sort of a package to make sure that when the operator turns, it's available. They don't have to bend down too far. They don't have to reach up too high. You don't damage the product. Those kits sometimes follow the product down the line. Sometimes they're delivered autonomously. Sometimes there's multiple kits per product. We do a lot of sub-assemblies. So rather than having to assemble a front end or a bumper on the truck, we've got it already assembled. They just have to turn and do the installation. We've got line sequencing, so I know that for the next 20 trucks, this is the next vehicle that I need to have for a hose or a battery cable that might be slightly different. So I reach for 001, I grab the 001 kit or the sequence, 002, grab the 002. We do metering, so I've got doors. I only need to have 100 doors on site at any one time. When I get down to 50, meter over the next 100 doors. And then we have freight deconsolidation. So as we take trailer loads of material that might not be dedicated, we'll deconsolidate that, spread them out to those MSSs and make sure they're getting them appropriately. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm talking fast and no one's asking questions, but that's okay. Another one, yes. 232s, yeah. Yep. Yeah, so it's a great question. I always say we're a tweet away from something happening, or whatever the X's are called. I don't know if they're called tweets anymore. Um, it's impacted us pretty substantially, right? Again, we're well positioned because of where we manufacture, but those tariff costs are impactful, and they change monthly or quarterly, or sometimes they have lawsuits against them. So we have to make the best informed decision we have at the time, try to pass those costs on or those cost benefits on, and reposition ourselves. Yeah, good question. Yes. How do you do at such a fast rate, like 6 per minute, if each one is like different? Yeah, great question. So we have work instructions that are electronic throughout the factory. So employees can always reference and say, hey, here's how I assemble, or here's how I route this, or here's how I position this component, depending on what the customer wants. Over the course of time, there are a lot of kind of repetition things. So axles are positioned only where axles can go based on mounting positions or brackets or holes. So some of that's kind of you get used to it. But there's often change. In Renton, the average fleet size was 1.2 trucks. Here, it's more like a 12 truck fleet. So you're seeing some more repetition, but It's really relying on the work instructions, training, and then there is kind of that word of mouth and getting used to it. Yeah. Okay, technologies. So at those third-party logistics folks, we leverage technologies that might not be, I guess, super technological when you think about it, but Pictolite's a good example of one. So when the operator's trying to make a kit or put something together, they go through, they scan the build paper, and then they'll have a light that'll light up on what component they need to go grab out of the bin. So simple visual management, but it's very helpful. Put to light's very similar. Instead of picking the component, they're putting the components in where the lights are telling them to put the component in. We use scan to puts. We use visual assisted picks. So we've got some wearable technology that folks can come by and say, hey, I'm looking. It's going to capture what the component looks like or the barcode on the rack and say, yep, this is what I want. I can verify that. We've got scan and verification, and then we leverage a manufacturing execution system. So again, some of these aren't cutting edge, best thing ever, but very practical and cost effective for what we do and how we utilize them. Material handling methods. So consistently still leverage fork trucks. Those happen to be probably the most dangerous things within our factories, right? So we're always trying to limit what kind of trucks movement we have. So we've got single sequence trams now. So this is someone that's got visual 360-degree everywhere. They'll drop off 2 or 3 kits and pick up empty kits that can be used. We've got multi-sequence kits in pallets. We've got single sequence kit carts. We've got metered bulk product, so large numbers of tow hitches or shackle brackets if necessary, and then kind of tier one products. So we'll line up the next 6 emissions canisters that we need to put up there. Our command center or material command center is where if there is an issue, someone gets damaged online or the missing component, they'll call them. It's kind of like the 1-800 hotline. You guys don't know what 1-800 numbers are. It's kind of like the emergency button on your phones, and you say, hey, I need help, help me where to put this or where to find this. So we've got those strategically positioned with our factories as well. Okay, so with materials, who do we work with? We work with everybody. We are, like I say, the lifeline of the factory. So our MSSs, our carriers, our purchasing department who handles all the commercial negotiations, our quality department when there's issue with components, certainly the supply base. We work very closely with engineering on either deviated products if we can't get something in time or resolving issues. Our supplier quality who goes out to the suppliers and fixes quality, certainly our production group. But supply chain and materials is really dynamic. There's not a day that goes by that someone's not happy with you, you don't have an issue to resolve, or you haven't worked with some other functional area within the organization. So if you want a boring job, I'd stick to something else. If you want a dynamic job, supply chain is where you want to be. So what differentiates PACCAR from everybody else? I've said before, we're a for-profit company. We're here to make money, but really what we stand on is this pillar of quality, technology, innovation. We have internal standard policy bulletins, so kind of the tenets of what PACCAR stands by. You call them your commandments or something similar to that. Ours is SP1, the first one, quality, right? Making sure we're doing what our customers expect us to do and putting a good quality product out there. We adapt to market conditions. Again, whether that's changing of industrial norms and moving more towards autonomous or electric vehicles, or it's adapting to legislature on emissions regulations, or it's dealing with hurricanes or natural disasters or other opportunities that come through the supply chain. We're financially strong. We've got a lot of cash. We're ripe for purchasing if we need to, either a supplier or a technology or some sort of a joint venture. But we appreciate having that cash on hand. We're very conservative that way. I think importantly is the last two, the culture and the dedicated employees. You learn pretty quickly if you can work at PACCAR. And I say that because you work hard, right? But it's this culture of commitment and dedication. And so I know that my colleagues will show up to a meeting on time and not walk in late and not have excuses. They'll have gotten the work done. And those that don't do that, it's kind of that self-policing or self-reinforced say, maybe you're not a good fit for this organization. That's true of every division I've worked in within PACCAR. That culture of we want to do good, we want to do our best, we want our customers to see that quality bleeds out in everything we do, and that reinforce that message throughout the culture. So what's new and exciting in the industry? So for supply chain, some of the things that we're doing, we're trying to leverage AI as best as possible. So we have chatbots, we've got the use of having look aheads and summaries and trying to dig into data that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do very quickly. We're looking at autonomous vehicles. So that's specific to the one pictured here. It goes up and down aisles and automatically does inventory counts off shift for cycle counting. So we've eliminated 3 people doing that and repositioned them to do more value-added work than something as trivial as this. On the transportation side, driver regulations are constantly changing. We talked earlier with your professor about English language laws coming into effect. So that's eliminated a lot of the workforce, which is posed to be a huge challenge. You've got hours of service regulations, and you've got things like non-diesel alternatives. These are more prevalent now in Europe, but driving towards lower emission standards and how we leverage, clean technology. Current challenges, man, we could spend the next 25 minutes talking about this. Geopolitical factors, right? We get freight out of the Middle East. We get, movement through canals that are, oh, thank you for that. Um, Movement through canals that are challenged right now, regulatory changes, right? We're at the mercy of what the government chooses to do or doesn't choose to do, and that changes typically every 4 years. Tariffs. We've talked through tariffs already, but that's been a huge challenge over the last couple of years. And that's not just where we build the trucks, but where we source the components and how we relocate suppliers from one region to a different region and the challenges that come with that. And then supply chain disruptions. This week alone, we've had a fire at a production facility impacting throughput for quality testing. We've had a bankruptcy. We've had workforce labor issue, and anything else that happens, right? People have issues throughout the day. So all sorts of stuff that goes on. And again, that's fun. That's exciting. You got to deal with challenges. You got to adapt to them. And we've got really good processes in place and backups in place and good support there. But there are challenges nonetheless. So beneficial firsthand experience from my perspective, networking. This is a great start. You're here, I'm here, Heather's here. We can answer questions about Peterbilt and PACCAR, which is great. Lead by example. So even when I was just an employee, an entry-level employee, I'd follow what my father told me. I'd show up on time. I'd dress the part. I'd ask questions. I'd do whatever the company asked me to do and volunteer for things. Surround yourself with a diverse team. I am certainly not an expert in anything that I do. I'm again, a history major that happened to stumble upon a great career path here. And I've learned things over time, don't get me wrong, but I've got experts in every field and I rely on them heavily, right? This is a lot about we and how we as an organization succeed, which goes into number 4, work hard and smart. So I put a lot of effort into what I do. I'm the guy that shows up to make sure that I'm not going to get a bad grade because I'm at class every day. I might not understand the content very well, and I might struggle with some of those things, but I'll sure as hell make sure that I'm there. Give credit and accept blame. I'm the first one to defend my team and to give the praise for when they do something great, and when something's wrong, it's on me. And again, taught by my father to do that, and it's worked well for me as well. I make a ton of mistakes. I was told early, make mistakes and learn from them. Don't make too many mistakes too often, and don't make the same mistake more often than you shouldn't. So I've had good mentors, which is great. I've learned from all of them, but mistakes are okay. Again, you got to learn from them. If you don't try, you're not gonna do well. And people say the phrase "fail forward." I think it's very apt to say "fail forward." Think big and small. So I mentioned kind of this formative career path I'm on right now is thinking of these visionary things of how we can transform the organization, what we do next. That's important, but I'm also on calls to figure out how to resolve issues day to day. And that's a balance of kind of what I enjoy doing, what's expected of me, and being, in tune with what's going on. But there's always going to be that, high level thought process and the tactical thought process. You got to do both. And then remember, you're always on, right? So I learned this when I was in Ohio. It was a small town, 20,000 person town, 3,000 people employed by Kenworth. Everywhere I went, I was the Kenworth senior assistant plant manager. On shift, off shift, my family, anytime you're on, right? So that's recognizing your values, your personal values, what you do, how you reflect on the organization, always important to understand that. That is a picture of me 3 years ago accepting the safety award for Dynacraft with our CEO and our president. So, in case you wanted to know, I'm the handsome guy in the middle. I talked a lot, half hour, lots of questions. This is my LinkedIn QR code if you want this. I got analog business cards for those of you that are my generation. If you LinkedIn me, please make just a reference as, hey, I met you at UNT, so I don't automatically delete you and say I don't know who you are, because I probably won't know anyone except if they tell me that. Um, with that, yes, questions.
Um, so you seem to really like your job. Not that any of us here are trying to take your job, but if any of us were interested in a, similar director level job, do you think that would require an MBA like you have, or just a bachelor and a high level of competence and ambition? Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know PACCAR really appreciates degrees and education. That said, they also appreciate real life experience, commitment, analytical prowess, dedication, all those factors. The old general manager Dynakrap said it's only important until it's not. So leadership structure changes, there's always deviations to kind of guidelines, but ultimately, yeah, you're going to want to have an advanced education. PACCAR paid for my advanced education. So I'd encourage everyone to find an organization that's going to help supplement your student loans and help perform that benefit to you. And when I was there, it was 100%. Now it's 50%, which is still fantastic, but I lucked out pretty well. What else? Still 50%, by the way. Join Peterbilt, join PACCAR. Yes.
Having manufacturing plants in different countries, what hurdles have you guys had to get over in terms of just having to supply different languages with the things? Like, do you have different divisions with translators, or how does that work?
Yeah, interesting. If I understand the question correctly, I mean, we have components that have to be English, French, Spanish, like for manuals and labels and decals and things like that. Certainly, our suppliers primarily use English as a language, but we have, translators as necessary. We work closely with our teams in Europe who primarily speak Dutch and have passable English, but their passable English is thousands of times better than our passable Dutch. Um, I work closely with our Montreal facility, which is, in Quebec. So it's French is a primary language, and my French is not good. My Spanish is pretty good, although spoken slowly. So yeah, you've got to adapt and deal. Generally, you come to the same consensus, right? People generally speak English as the primary language and adapt. And but working with and trying to empathize with a different language or a barrier like that. From the supply side, again, most of the suppliers are in the US. We do have Canadian suppliers, Mexican suppliers. So there's sometimes are barriers or opportunities. You've got to deal with paperwork and different logistics, right? Crossing borders, that becomes challenging at times. We use brokerages as possible, but yeah, it's a global world. Yes.
Being put out, is it volatile, or do you see seasonality? Sometimes there's a lot of demand for new trucks on the road, sometimes it stays flat. What is that?
Yeah, great question. So, yes to both. It's a cyclical industry. Typically, it's driven by emissions changes. So, for the past 15 years, we've had an emissions change every 3 or 4 years. When you have an emissions change, typically it means things get more expensive. So, most of the content of the truck is kind of heavy components, axles, engines, transmissions. They have emissions control units or diesel particulate filters, which is very technical for a history major to say out loud, but basically make the emissions better. And those tend to be very costly. And every 3 or 4 years, they change that and they add more stricter parameters behind that. So we'll see a cycle that says, hey, when that's going to come, people are going to order trucks in advance of those changes to get a little bit cheaper. We're going through one of those right now. There's a change coming in 2027 for nitrous oxide emissions. Maybe I said that wrong. NOx emissions. I think it's nitrous oxide. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, um, they're coming with a new change. So we're seeing an advanced buy of those right now, which is helpful. But we do see seasonality too, right? So we'll see vocational trucks heavier in certain seasons. Those are the trucks that are hauling granite or cement or housing builds, that kind of stuff, right? Building materials versus on highway Amazon goods and trinkets and things like that. So yeah, a combination of both. Um, Overall, the market continues to grow as well, so that floor every year kind of raises a little bit. It used to be that we're at 140 trucks a day right now at Peterbilt. That used to be the high, 10 years ago, and now that's 140 is no big deal. We want to get to 200 trucks a day, which is every 3 minutes a truck coming offline. So yeah, yes, sir. Oh. That's a great question. Um, this is going to sound pretty stupid actually, but it's located at the Peterbilt division office. And I'm agnostic. I should probably be at our North Texas office where all the other agnostic divisions are. So I get kind of sucked into a lot of the Peterbilt centric things versus some of the Kenworth centric things. Um, from a broader answer to that question, it's really hard to be aware of everything going on in the organization. And running the division in McKinney, I was, open to going to these meetings and being treated as kind of one of these top 50 executives and seeing that global. And now it's kind of brought me back down to earth of I've got my space. Yeah, it's a pretty big space, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit more narrow and I'm not included in some of those upper level meetings. So I selfishly would like to be included in those, but I love the fact that I screw up every day and, any truck that's going offline, missing a part, that's my fault. I relish in that. Yeah, good question. What else? Yes.
Firing out. She had mentioned a lot of time testing the part and going through the bullet points that you had mentioned, many faults and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Traits that exhibit that for you is not or stands out.
Yeah, that's a great question. I want interns that are enthusiastic, that want to learn more about the business, that care about what they're doing, that volunteer, for anything that might seem small or not small. They want to be part of the project. They want to ask questions. They want to, engage in, I call it small talk or, non-work related functions. I think that's important. Um, someone that's going to do what they say they were going to do, right? If they're committed to doing something and hitting a timeline, they're going to do it that way. Yeah, good question. Saw a hand, maybe? No? What if I were going to cover something that I didn't cover? What would you want to know? You must have some questions. Yes.
So you gave us what looked like you have a nice personal life, right?
Sure.
Talk about having an enjoyable professional life. What's work-life balance look like to you?
I love this question. I sleep about 4 hours a night because I'm crazy and I've been able to do that and still live. I'll probably be unthankful for that in another 20 years, but I'm always on. And it's crazy to think that way and I enjoy it that way. I do nap occasionally on a weekend, but um, it is a balance. I try to keep work at work. It's challenging across multiple time zones. I'm up early. I'm on calls by 6. I'm on calls till 7 on the West Coast. And then I'm typically looking at my device periodically. That said, as I've advanced my career and I said kind of gotten comfortable at this year and position I'm in, I go to my kids' events. I don't have my devices with me at those times. I'm committed to making sure I'm giving them the opportunity that they have and they need as they've aged. They see that, and I think it's more important to them. But it's a struggle. Every day is a struggle, right? What am I missing over the next 45 minutes I've been here, and what's going to haunt me later, and what's waiting for me when I get home tonight? And then it's, oh, I'm up again the next morning dealing with challenges. So that's probably the biggest challenge that you're all going to face, right? You've got to choose what's important to you. I always say, family, faith, work, health, somewhere in that order. You got to figure that out and live with it. And it's okay, right? I'm content now not being the next CEO of the organization because I want to make sure that I'm giving time to my family and making time for things that I want to do. And I've seen a lot of colleagues that either aren't married or don't have families and are wholly driven by career, and that's great. That's for them, and they succeed and they surpass, so to speak. And look, I'm competitive. I want to be the next person to a certain extent, but not at the the stress levels or the challenges they deal with. I started buying toilet tissue and office supplies. If somebody missed their pen, that wasn't a big deal. Toilet paper, maybe that was a bigger deal, right? And then it's kind of, okay, I'm leading an organization of 50 people. And then in Dynacraft, it was 2,000 people. And now I've got like 4,000 people every day, depending on me or parts that I provide. And when I don't have that happening, something's bad. So that kind of stress or in the back of your mind, always saying, hey, don't screw this up, that pushes me harder to work smarter, better, and understand that, the impact that I have is huge. Then you take a look at someone like Preston, who's got 30,000 employees, and I used to moan all the time of saying, hey, how come these decisions don't get made? Well, because he's thinking about 30,000 people. He's got to understand what that decision impact is going to be and the repercussions of those decisions, right? And as I've advanced in my career, those decisions become harder and harder and more thoughtful. So, yeah, good question. Hopefully that answered it. What else? No one asked, like, what's the best part of the truck or how many parts are on a truck? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Something that you carry process.
Oh, I have two. So the first one, one's kind of a joke, but not really. So the first one, we had a supplier come in for a meeting, and it was a really bad meeting. The supplier wasn't prepared, and I sent my colleague an email and said, "Man, that was awful. I can't believe so and so did that." And she responded and said, "You just responded to the supplier and everybody else that was in that meeting." And I was like, "Oh man, that was unprofessional of me." And then she said, "I'm just kidding, but don't do that again." So I learned from that very quickly. Everything is traceable, and you're responsible again for what you do. Mistakes I've made a ton. When I was in our purchasing organization, we had a supply issue and I was working on a contract and the contract was taking some time back and forth with the supplier. And I said, well, it's Friday. I'll get to that over the weekend and didn't get to go over the weekend. And then Monday came, so I'll get to that Tuesday. Needless to say, we missed components Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and 30 trucks were missing these components because I didn't do my job and finalize that negotiation. And when I went down to the Renton factory, I learned that the roles that I was in has a huge impact. You didn't consider those days and the time to get something done, right? So that was very helpful and eye-opening. And when you're next to the person who installs the harness that he didn't have, and you come in the next weekend to install the harness with them, it says, hey, you didn't get it from me on Friday. You're going to be here on Saturday until I get this installed. That was a life lesson. So yeah, good question. Yes. The hardest part of making a truck. Yeah, I mean, easy for me to say. I've never been a truck assembler. I've tried working each of the jobs when I was in Ohio. I was bad at almost all of them. I was good at installing zip ties. There's a lot of zip ties on trucks. So I'm really good at that. Um, Typically, the heavier components you'd think are the hardest ones just based on kind of the physical movement of them. But really, I would consider kind of interior components, right? I don't have tiny hands and some of the kind of finish work where you have to plug things in and make these connections. I don't do well with that kind of fine work. When I do home improvement projects, it's more of a, that's pretty good. No one's going to see that. You can't do that in truck building. When it comes to heavy components, it's all about safety and ergonomics. We've got lift assists and devices and all those types of things. So very rare lifting more than 30 pounds. Yeah. You had a question too?
But if you had to point.
Did you say I'm really smart? Is that what you kind of a backhanded compliment for me?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that.
If there were one place that you could point college students to that you found really helpful, a book or a resource or something to that effect, where would you put it?
Good point. Good question. I wouldn't say a book necessarily. I think that kind of real world experience is valuable. When I worked at the trophy company, it was interacting with customers. It was kind of seeing production and how that production flow worked. I did catalog sales prior to that. So it was understanding systems and, influencing of kind of spiffs or how to, reward people for certain things. I worked at a cruise line for a while before that. So it was, again, customer interaction and having to be on the whole time and smile and wave. I wasn't on the ship. I was meeting people at the airport. And then within PACCAR, yeah, it's kind of a combination of all those things. So I think real world experience. So whether that's as a student, as an intern, if it's asking questions in some of these networking events, all that's valuable. Yep. Oh man, that's a great question. So in the perfect world, you've got 3,000-ish parts on a truck, not including zip ties. There's a lot of zip ties. Um, every truck has to have all their components for it to be out on the road, right? So if I'm missing a label, if I'm missing a bolt, if I'm missing an engine, that truck doesn't go through the process. It might go through the process part of the way, but it's deviating from the standard of what it should be. So we always assume we're going to be perfect, and in a perfect world, that's great. And guess what? We're about, on average, 80% perfect with materials and about 90% perfect with kind of processes. It depends on the time of the year and what the supply base is doing and how much we're giving the supply base knowledge, what we're going to do in the future. So I think there's challenges there. But yeah, the hidden factories, I mean, parts get assembled outside of the assembly line at times, right? It's more cost effective for us to build a truck without an engine and then install the engine later. Every truck goes through an extensive quality process check multiple times throughout the process of online and then offline. We do all of our testing and validations to 150, 180% of what the standard is. When I drive down the road and my kids are all almost driving now, avoiding trucks and big, semis and stuff, I have no problem driving next to a camera with a repeater bolt. I don't. I've seen the employees, I've seen the commitment, dedication. Selfishly, I know we build the best product, but I wouldn't want to drive next to anybody else, passenger car or truck. So I'm very confident and respect the employees and the commitment they have towards quality and safety. Yeah. Yes.
If you like inspecting vehicle, find something that maybe was like the middle or like from the beginning of the process that you want. What is like the procedure for like being efficient, saving time, but also like you can't send it out like that. So what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we want the customer to have what they want. If something gets scratched, they'll replace a part. If something's not working as appropriate, we'll hold the truck until we need to, right? We're driven by the bottom line, but that first and foremost SP1 quality is we're going to hold it until we feel safe or comfortable. We've got some supply concerns right now with aluminum parts based on some of the aluminum supply challenges we've had. We're considering opportunities like, hey, well, can we do something different than what we typically do to still, get product out, but make sure that it's safe and, doing extensive testing and retesting and all those other factors. So yeah, we're never going to deviate from quality or safety. Those are the first things that we want to make sure that our customers feel for the quality perspective and that certainly our employees feel from the safety perspective. Yes.
That you were caffeine free for 25 years.
Yeah, still.
What happened maybe in like the first 10 years that you said, that's like good.
So
And now that you mentioned that you get like 4 hours of sleep, so what did you use like maybe like just like I logged in.
I tell it's transparent, right? No, there's no other substance that I use or anything else that keeps me. I'm just wired this way. So I'm awake. I know that wasn't your question, but I'm always kind of just on. I started when I was in college drinking a lot of caffeine to stay up and do things, and I didn't like it. I gained a lot of weight, messed with my mind. I had kind of this detox for 2 weeks where it was, shakes and jitters and no more Diet Coke. What are you going to do? And then I resolved it. From Seattle, I don't drink coffee, which is really weird. And I've just never needed it. I've always been a morning person, and I've become a evening person too. So yeah, there's a question over here, I thought, or a hand or a shake. No. What else? Favorite Halloween costume? No. Yeah. Who's our biggest customer? Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so oddly enough, our biggest customers are leasing company. They buy more trucks and then lease them out. Outside of our own internal divisions, we work with all the big customers. So you'll see them R&L carriers. You've got Knight Swift. Typically most of these people buy different products. I think that's intentional to make sure they can leverage pricing and make sure they're getting the latest and greatest. But we've got strong customer base throughout the company.